Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is going to be a Heel Heat Top 10. The topic of this Top 10, Top 10 Good Wrestlers with a Bad Gimmick. Now we're going to go through history and we're going to look at some of the guys that were saddled with bad gimmicks but otherwise are tremendous wrestlers. And you'll notice some omissions, guys like Doink. I don't necessarily consider that a bad gimmick. Or Kamala, who I think the gimmick helped his character and helped his wrestling career more than it hurt. Even though, retrospectively, it looks bad, at the time it wasn't as bad as it seemed. We're going to jump right into this with our number 10, Kerwin White and Lieutenant Loco, both for Chavo Guerrero Jr. Now, Chavo, being of the legendary Guerrero family, he was an excellent wrestler, always seemed to be stuck in the shadow of his Uncle Eddie. We didn't see till later on when they did the ECW reboot where Chavo got a chance himself to shine. But he was always a fantastic wrestler, always a good mid-card talent, cruiserweight champion, European champion, that kind of guy. It saddens me that both WCW and WWF gave him silly gimmicks. Lieutenant Loco and the Misfits in Action, which the whole group was silly. And Kerwin White, which, go back and watch the promos. The only reason that this is so far down, if that would have ran for a year, this would probably be number one, because that was so bad. I don't know what they expected or how they expected to go over. If you don't know Kerwin White, after you're done watching this, go back and watch that. Just Google it. Trust me. You're going to see how bad they can make a guy look. And Chavo had charisma. Again, he wasn't Eddie Guerrero, but he wasn't a brick either. He was someone that you could use and someone that you could build on the mid-card around. Number 9, the Red Rooster, given to Terry Taylor. Now, Terry Taylor had lots of success in Mid-South Wrestling, in the NWA territories, in UWF, which is what a Mid-South eventually became. He was brought into WWE, or WWF at the time. The story famously goes, they hired two guys at the same time, Kurt Hennig and Terry Taylor. One was going to be Mr. Perfect, the other was the Red Rooster. Fortunately, Terry got saddled with the Red Rooster gimmick. The only reason this is so low, and it's one of the worst gimmicks of all time, don't get me wrong. I don't think it should have been. If he would have put his heart into it and played it better, he could have been thought of in a better light. People of my generation look back at guys like the Bushwhackers, Coco Beware, people of that ilk, in a positive manner. We have fond memories of them. Terry Taylor, if he would have played this better, we would have fond memories of that as well. Unfortunately, he didn't seem to ever care about it, and his lack of caring and lack of effort helped to bury the character, which, again, granted it was silly, but in the realm that it was in with guys like the Berserker, the Warlord, aforementioned Coco Beware and the Bushwhackers, really wasn't that far off from what else was going around. He would have put more effort into it, it would have made it better, so I lay this more on him. But again, he is an immensely talented wrestler that was saddled with a bad gimmick. Number 8. Giant Bernard, or a.k.a. Baldo, a.k.a. Prince Albert, a.k.a. A-Train, coming back to the WWE and being, after 7 years being gone, being stuck with a horrible gimmick. I don't know who greenlit this. Lord Tensai. We were led to believe that him working in Japan for 7 years turned him into a Japanese person, I guess. I don't know. It made no sense. Most of the crowd remembered him as Albert. Most of them cheered Albert. Most of them still cheered Shave Your Back. All the stuff they cheered when Albert was around the first time, who had moderate success in the WWE. I thought Albert was a cool gimmick. There were some missteps with him. The hip-hop hippo thing I didn't like so much. I did like the portrayal of the serious A-Train version of Albert and the beginnings with him and Test. I thought, yeah, for the time, the character fit what was going on at the time. Tattoo and piercing started breaking into the mainstream culture, and I thought his gimmick as a tattoo artist fit. He had the look, he had tattoos, he had piercings all over him. So I think it fit a bit for him. Him going away, becoming huge in Japan as Giant Bernard, they could have brought that character or a version of the A-Train character back instead of this Lord Tensai crap where she was in samurai gear, had a fake tattoo painted on his face when not necessary. The guy had tattoos all over him. So I don't get it. I don't understand it. It didn't make sense. It seemed like something that would have worked back in the 80s or the 70s, but in 2012, 2011 when he came back there, whatever it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2012, it was no longer the time for that kind of gimmick. And it just looked silly and looked stupid. Now our number 7. This is a wrestler I personally don't like. However, I cannot argue that he was immensely talented and probably one of the best, most talented big men wrestlers of all time. That's Mike Awesome being saddled in WCW with the Fat Chick Thriller gimmick and the That 70s Guy gimmick. You have a guy coming into your promotion who, as the Gladiator and as Mike Awesome through FMW and ECW, was an absolute killing machine. He destroyed everything in his path. He looked like a serious monster. He looked like a world beater. You bring him in, you don't really know what to do with him, so you saddle him with this weird gimmick of being a Fat Chick Thriller, and do not get me wrong. There is nothing at all wrong with him being attracted to bigger women. Not a problem with that. That's perfectly fine. That's what he wants to do, and that's how they want to do it. The way they portrayed it as a joke is where I have the problem. You have a guy that's a monster, a killer, a great worker, a great wrestler, and this is what you choose for. Then he morphed into that 70s guy trying to leech off the popularity of the TV show That 70s Show, of course. And it got even more absurd. He had the Partridge Bus, all that stuff. Just leave him as Mike Awesome. Just left him alone, had him go out there, could even call him the Gladiator Mike Awesome. Let him be himself. Let him get over doing what got him over in FMW and ECW as a major star in both companies, and he would have got over there. Just my opinion. Now, number 6. Another big guy, maybe not as talented, but way more charisma. Probably the guy with the most charisma out of everyone on this list. Arguably some guy's other. Kevin Nash. In his early career in WCW, they couldn't dial in, much like what they with Mike Awesome, what to do with the guy. He ran through a Master Blaster's gimmick as Steel. Then he morphed into Oz as some kind of play off the Wizard of Oz, who knows. And then morphed into Vinny Vegas, which was similar to the Diesel Kevin Nash gimmick, but still hokey enough that it was bad. Here's a guy again who we get to see later on, somewhat in Diesel, and even more so when he becomes his own character, Kevin Nash, in the NWO, and goes by his own name. We see the full potential of what the guy can be. There's a reason why companies like WCW, WWF, even TNA continue to put championships on the guy. He sold tickets. And I understand people are going to say he was the champion of WWF in a down period, the worst period of the time. I get that. Don't mix that up with the fact that he was still the champion, and that wasn't all his fault. The roster, the times were changing quicker than the business was changing. All had a factor into that. It wasn't solely on Nash's shoulders like it was in the past on Bruno or Hogan. But the pure fact that WCW thought of Oz, Vinny Vegas, and Steel, which was, if you've never seen the Master Blasters, I don't think they had more than a month or two run. They were probably the 450th imitation of the Road Warriors, and I'm not even joking. They were an imitation of an imitation. You had already seen guys like the Powers of Pain and Demolition do it more successfully, and all through independent wrestling all over the country, all through the different promotions, they all had their Road Warrior ripoff or homage, whatever, however you want to take it. This was about the 400th time they tried it. It didn't work. Oz didn't work. Vinny Vegas didn't work. Luckily, Shawn Michaels seen something in him, had Vince bring him in. They gave him the Diesel character, which was more closer to who he is, let him break out. He went to WCW. They gave him even more free reign, and yes, he did do some bad things in WCW. He did cause some of the demise, but he also helped to bring it to its most profitable times, and also was a huge star at that time frame. Moving on, number 5. Luke, a.k.a. Doc Gallows, as Festus and Imposter King. Now, the Imposter King gimmick, I'll never understand why they think stuff will work like this. It never has, it never will. The fake Undertaker didn't work, the fake Diesel didn't work, the fake Razor Ramon didn't work. This will not work. Festus had potential. The whole comatose until the bell rings, which drives him into a frenzy, it worked. But guess what? It would have worked better in indie wrestling. It's not something that works on a long-term platform. Once you see that gimmick 3 or 4 times, it's already worn its course. It's already out of the way. And as we've seen through his runs in New Japan Pro Wrestling, even in the Aces and Eights, and now coming back to WWE where they're highly underutilizing him and Anderson, by the way, he's proven to be a much more capable wrestler, a much more talented wrestler, a guy that could put asses in the seats, a guy that could generate true emotions, whether it's hate or love for him. And it just didn't see. He's another guy. We got about 4 in a row of these giant men that are immensely talented, yet they don't know how to dial them into a gimmick that works for them. And I couldn't tell you why. Moving on from him, we're going to go on to a smaller guy, Al Snow. Now, it took Al Snow roughly 15, 17 years from the start of his career to the point where he became the Al Snow we know and love with Head and all that craziness and all that wild gimmick that he had. On the road to Head, I just realized how ridiculous that sounds as I said it. We went through Al being put into different incarnations, Avatar, Shinobi, both 2 masked wrestlers. Avatar came to the ring in a mask, took the mask off. Or no, he came to the ring without the mask on, put it on. I might be wrong just because I'm going on straight memory on this. He either came to the ring without the mask on and put it on to wrestle, or had it on the way to the ring and took it off to wrestle and then put it on afterwards. If you know what I'm talking about, comment down here so we know so everybody knows what the right thing is. Either way, he had a mask on, he would take it off and put it back on. That's basically the base of it. How silly does that sound? And Shinobi, who was basically a Mortal Kombat character, I've heard Al himself say they were trying to capitalize on Mortal Kombat. The original plan for the Shinobi character was to get vignettes in the vein of Glacier, but before they could start doing them, the Glacier vignettes started coming out, so they just threw them out on TV. Neither one of these worked, suffice to say, which led us to probably the most famous of Al's failed gimmicks, and that's as Leif Cassidy and the New Rockers. Much like I said about the imposters, anytime you put new in front of something, it never works. Never ever. The new Blackjacks didn't work, the new Midnight Express, new anything. Does not work. The point of something like the Midnight Express or the Blackjacks or the Rockers is you catch lightning in a bottle. It is so hard to find that lightning. There's only one Rockers. There was hundreds of tag teams at the time of the Rockers, but only a handful got up to the level they did. Putting together the New Rockers. Now, again, going back to interviews I've seen with Al, I do think they could have been successful if they were called something other than the New Rockers. Maybe if they were called, I don't know, any name. The Snowmen, Jannetty and Friends, Al Snow and Marty Jannetty, Leif Cassidy and Marty Jannetty. I think both guys were talented enough that that tag team could have went on to success if it wasn't saddled with the bad name. Leif did not get over. Marty left the company again through controversies, as Marty had been known to do. Vince McMahon loaned Leif Cassidy to ECW, where he famously washed out and flushed out the Al Snow and Head gimmick. It got over like crazy in ECW. It became one of the biggest things they had. Of course, Vince said, hey, time to come back to the main roster guy. Brought him back. Al had his run. He was a legendary character, one of the guys that, when you look back at the Attitude Era, you remember stuff that Al Snow did, whether it was his feud with the Boss Man, whether it was Head itself, him and Mick Foley riffing off of each other. Just tons of things that Al did. His hardcore runs. Just a fun guy and a great addition to the show. A guy that took way too long to get to where he was. Now our number 3 is a guy you're seeing right there. He's another one of these huge wrestlers who had a gimmick that was very successful and then got reverted into bad gimmicks. Earthquake. Earthquake was a monster heel, a monster wrestler in the 80s, had a great run with Hogan, had a great tag team with Typhoon, aka Tugboat, aka the Shockmaster, who's a whole nother story. He's not on this list, but we can make a whole list of stuff they did wrong with Fred Ottman. And we'd probably have more than 10. Earthquake was a believable contender for every championship in the WWE. His Natural Disasters tag team was an absolute monster team. Very believable, very credible. He was an actual real badass. He's a sumo wrestler before coming to WWE. He leaves WWE, heads down to WCW, as a lot of guys did at the time, where they repackage him as Avalanche. Basically, can't use the Earthquake character, so we'll do Avalanche. WWE says, you're still a little too close, so this is where it gets into the bad. They repackage him as the Shark. And the man has to cover up his tiger tattoo, because he's dedicated. He's dedicated to the craft. He covers up his tiger tattoo with a shark tattoo, starts painting a shark mouth on him, gets stuck in the legendarily hilarious gimmick of the Dungeon of Doom. Yet this still wouldn't be the worst for the man. A few years after, we get the Oddities. I have a love-hate relationship with the Oddities. I love the concept. I love the guys that were involved. I hate how it was presented and what came from it. You put Earthquake in a mask and called him Golga. A brown mask and put lumps inside of it. Had him wearing an Eric Cartman shirt. at the height of, at the beginning of South Park when it was a big craze. Here was a guy who main evented with Hulk Hogan, and now he's in a third-rate comedy act. The whole thing could have been done a lot better. I think the Oddities had immense amount of talent, whether it be Earthquake, Giant Silva, or Golga. Or, I'm sorry, not Golga. Giant Silva, Earthquake, and Kurgan was the other guy. The Insane Clown Posse being involved, Luna being involved. I thought there was a lot of potential there for interesting stories. Unfortunately, somebody in the back did not, and they were just weird cannon fodder for the stars of the day. Now our number 2 is on the other side. You may have heard me mention the brevity of some gimmicks, making them look lower on the list, like a Kerwin White's brevity not affecting Chavo as badly. He got saddled with a gimmick, and this is Shane Douglas, by the way, if you don't know. Shane went from ECW, where he was the hottest thing in ECW. He took ECW from Eastern Championship Wrestling, famously threw down that belt, declared the ECW Championship the World Championship, which became Extreme Championship Wrestling, led them to their first real boom and exposure and real steps into the mainstream. Vince McMahon sees it, decides to hire him, brings him in as Dean Douglas. Now, the Dean Douglas thing didn't last 6 months. Sorry, folks. The reason it's up here so much, so high, is you had one of the most talented talkers and wrestlers of the 1990s, and you saddled him with a gimmick that was so hokey and bad that it did irreparable damage to him and the WWE, and his relationship with the WWE. He was in an era where they should have been transferring from the silly gimmicks to the more serious. However, they seem to want to continue down the path of the silly. And it just didn't work. It took Shane going back to ECW, reinvigorating the franchise character, doing his thing in WCW, who also misused him, by the way. But they at least stuck with the franchise character. His runs in TNA, which were successful, but it was towards the end of his career. We all know and love Shane as the ECW legend. Dean Douglas pretty much curtailed that and hurt his chances of being a huge star in either WWE or WCW. Now, before we get to the number 1, we do a little thing here called the best of the rest. Just a couple guys that just barely missed the list. I'm going to go through them quickly, not give us much explanation. Damian Sandow as Aaron Rex. Sandow was tremendously over in the WWE, goes to TNA, gets repackaged as basically Liberace, I guess, and sinks like a rock. Also, Skinner, who in previous iterations was Steve Kern, part of the Fantastics and also a fantastic solo wrestler in his own right. Skinner could have been a good gimmick, the hunter, outdoorsman. Man, I am so sorry. Kind of guy that he was. However, again, it was never packaged as a serious threat to anybody, and you took a guy who was a legend in the business at the time and made a joke out of him. Now, before we get into our number 1, if you thought I put something up too high, put something down too low, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think on this list. If there's somebody I left off altogether, let me know. Our number 1 guy is Glen Jacobs, aka Kane. Kane was saddled with 2 gimmicks that should have probably destroyed his career. It's a testament to how good of a character and how good of a worker Kane is that he got over in that character, which should have been the third of 3 failed gimmicks in the WWF. The first being Isaac Yankem, which was terrible. a dentist gimmick that only had a certain amount of shelf life, and he had to know that going in. Again, it was played during a time where WWE should have been skewing more serious, and they kept skewing more cartoony. Then, you've heard me mention it a couple times, fake Diesel. Imposter gimmicks do not get over. Imposter gimmicks do not get over. New gimmick, new version does not get over. Ever. It is never going to work. It never has. It never will. Please stop trying it. Every promoter everywhere, please stop trying. It will never get over in your promotion. Luckily, he gets put with Kane, which I am to assume was supposed to only be a short run and then disappear again. He's made 20 years out of the character, and he's made it successful 20 years. Arguably, other than maybe Kevin Nash, the most successful wrestler on this list, and I would say he's even more successful than Kevin Nash at this point. One of my personal favorites, awesome wrestler who could have easily fell by the wayside and became just another guy that you remember, like a Sparky Plug, who became Bob Holly, which was another one I forgot to mention on my best of the rest. Or all the silly gimmicks of the time, the Mantars, the Red Roosters, the Shark, the Dungeon of Doom, all that silliness. It was the mid-90s. That could have killed his career. Luckily, the wrestler himself was talented enough to withstand all that and become what he became later on. But basically, that's my list. Like I said, let me know what you think. Also, hit the like button, share button, comment, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe. At the time of this recording, we're running a subscriber drive, and we have a contest that once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to do some giveaways. If you go back to the page, you can see the video talking all about that. Go like that video and share it as well, and subscribe. Make sure you subscribe, pound the like, pound the share, comment on the videos. But basically, that's all I have to say on this. My name is George Coles, and this has been a Heel Heat Top 10.